eat that food now and make sure you finish it.
The day they placed a plate of leftover yam on the floor and told me to eat beside the dogs, something inside me cracked. Not broke, cracked, like a clay pot that has been hit but has not yet fallen, still holding water but barely. My name is Esther, and I want to tell you my story from the beginning, because if I just show you the ending, you will not understand the fire that burned in my chest for 2 full years. You will not understand why, when my moment came, I did not run away from it. I walked into it slowly, wearing my best shoes. But first, let me take you back. I grew up in a small town called Umonze, somewhere between the red dust roads and the mango trees that lined the village square. My father was a quiet man, a serious man, a man who wore simple clothes and drove an old Peugeot, even though he did not have to. He was the kind of man who believed that a person's character was more important than their display. He was also the governor of Enugu State. We did not grow up knowing we were rich. I mean, we knew we were comfortable, but my father hated show. He sent me and my 2 younger brothers to a local boarding school for secondary education. He said it would build character. He said the children of poor men and rich men must sit on the same bench and learn together. My mother agreed. She always agreed with him. She was that kind of woman, quiet strength wrapped inside soft fabric. When I finished secondary school, my father sent me to live with his elder sister, Auntie Rita, in Aba. He was going to travel abroad for medical treatment, and my mother would go with him. My brothers went to stay with our uncle in Umuahia. I was 18, stubborn and full of hope. He told Auntie Rita to take care of me like her own daughter. She smiled and nodded and said, "Of course, my brother, she is my own child." She lied. From the first morning I arrived at her compound, I saw it in her eyes, that specific kind of contempt that women hide behind smiles. She looked at me the way a person looks at an inconvenience, like furniture that has been placed in the wrong room. Within 1 week, the housegirl role had transferred from her actual housegirl, Grace, to me. I was washing clothes by hand, sweeping the entire compound before 6 in the morning, fetching water from the tap outside because she refused to fix the pipes inside, cooking for her husband Uncle Festus, and their 3 children, Blessing, Daniel, and the youngest, Tina. I thought it was temporary. I thought she was testing me. I was wrong. One evening, after I had cooked all her soup from scratch, grinding the pepper by hand, washing the cocoyam until my fingers were numb, her daughter Blessing walked past the pot, dipped her finger in without washing her hands, and declared that the soup was not sweet enough. Auntie Rita did not taste it. She just poured it into the dog's bowl. She handed me a plate of cold, leftover yam from 2 days ago and pointed to the floor near the kennel where they kept 2 large dogs. "Eat there," she said simply. "Since you cannot cook properly, you will eat where the animals eat." I stood there for 3 full seconds. I heard the dogs panting. I smelled the kennel. I looked at the plate on the floor, and something inside me cracked. I sat down, and I ate. Not because I had given up, but because I was 18, alone, and my father was somewhere in Germany fighting illness. I had no phone. Auntie Rita had collected it on my second day, saying I would be distracted. And I told myself quietly like a prayer, this will not be my story forever. If you have ever been treated like you were less than nothing in a place that was supposed to feel like home, this story is for you. Subscribe to this channel because what happens next will remind you that God does not sleep and the wicked never escape the harvest of their cruelty. The weeks became months, and the months became a pattern so painful that I stopped counting days. Every morning, I woke up before the rooster crowed, not because someone shook me. I had trained my body to wake itself in fear, because if I did not have the compound swept before Auntie Rita opened her bedroom door, she would slap me. Not once, twice. One for being lazy, and one so you will remember. Her husband, Uncle Festus, was a different kind of evil. He did not raise his hand. He used silence and snaring. He would sit at the dining table while I served food, and if the soup was too hot, he would tilt his chin upward and say, "This girl has no sense." If the soup was lukewarm, he would say, "Are we eating for the dead?" Nothing I did was ever right. Everything I did was a new excuse for humiliation. But Blessing, their first daughter, who was my age, Blessing was the sharpest knife in that house. She had her mother's eyes and her father's tongue. She would wear my clothes without asking. I had arrived with one small bag of good clothes, dresses my mother had carefully ironed and folded before I left. Blessing would take them, wear them to the market, return them dirty or torn, and if I said anything, she would raise her voice and call her mother, "Mama, this girl is being rude to me." And Auntie Rita would come out of the room with that terrible calm, the calm before she struck. I stopped saying anything. I remember one Tuesday, market day, when I had been in that house for exactly 4 months. I was cooking egusi soup, and the firewood was wet from overnight rain. The fire kept dying. Tina, the youngest, had been crying all morning because she wanted biscuits I had not bought, because no one gave me money for biscuits. The soup was taking long because of the fire, and Auntie Rita had guests coming. She came to the kitchen. She took one look at the dying fire. Then she picked up the nearest thing her hand could reach, a wooden ladle, and she hit me across my back. Once. "Useless girl," she said. "You are a burden I should never have carried." I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood because I would not cry in front of her. I had made that decision on my first week. She would never see my tears. Tears were mine. Tears were the only private thing left to me in that compound. But at night, in the small room they had given me, a room with no window, just a small opening near the ceiling, I would cry into my wrapper, silently, until the wrapper was wet and I had nothing left inside me. There was a woman in the compound next door. Her name was Mama Joy. She was a fat, kind woman who sold pepper soup near the motor park. Sometimes she would see me drawing water from the tap in the early morning and she would call me over and give me akara wrapped in newspaper. She never asked questions. She would just hand it to me, squeeze my hand and say, "God day." Those 2 words kept me alive in that house. God day. The only communication I had with my father was through letters. Auntie Rita allowed 1 letter per month, which she supervised. I could not write the truth. I wrote in code, hoping my father, a smart man, would read between the lines. I am learning many things here. I am growing stronger every day. I miss home. But the letter stopped coming back after the 3rd month. Auntie Rita said the postal service was unreliable. I did not believe her, but I had no proof. I had nothing. What I did not know, what I could not have known, was that my father had recovered from his medical treatment and had returned to Nigeria. He had been trying to reach me, but Auntie Riva had told him I was fine, that I was in school, that I was happy. She had even forged letters in my name, calm and cheerful letters, written in handwriting that looked nothing like mine. She was not just wicked, she was calculated. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a cold fear began to settle. What if she never planned to let me go? But what broke me was not the hunger or the beatings or the stolen clothes. It was the morning she brought a stranger to the house and introduced me as her house girl, and that stranger believed her. His name was Kenneth. He was 24, a graduate, the son of Auntie Rita's church friend. He came to the house one Saturday morning because their families were discussing some business. He wore a clean blue shirt and carried himself with that gentle confidence that educated young men sometimes have. I opened the gate for him. I was wearing a faded blouse and a wrapper tied at my waist because my dress was being used by Blessing. My hair was not done. My hands were rough from scrubbing. I had a mark on my forearm from where the hot pot had grazed me 2 days before. He looked at me the way people look at something they feel sorry for. Quickly, carefully, then away, so they do not embarrass you with their pity. Auntie Rita came out smiling in her good wrapper, gold earrings, the full picture of a respectable woman. "Ah, Kenneth, welcome, welcome, come inside." She waved at me without looking. "Girl, bring cold water and chin-chin." Girl, not Esther, not my niece, not even the name of a stranger, just girl. The way you refer to furniture, the way you dismiss the presence of something that does not count. I went inside and brought the tray. I set it down carefully. I kept my eyes on the tray. But Kenneth looked at me again, and this time, when our eyes met, I saw something in his face I had not seen in a long time. Not pity, curiosity, like he was trying to read a book in a language he almost knew. "What is your name?" he asked. Before I could answer, Auntie Rita laughed, that bright hostess laugh she reserved for guests. "Ah, Kenneth, don't mind her. She is just the house girl. She is shy. Esther, go back to the kitchen." And I went. But something had shifted. Not outside, inside, deep in the place where shame lives. Because I knew who I was. I had not forgotten. I was Esther, daughter of Chief Emmanuel Osei, governor of Enugu State. I had been to Abuja. I had sat in state dinners. I had shaken the hands of senators. I had a father who loved me so deeply that he once drove 4 hours because I was sick at school and he wanted to be the one to give me my medicine. And here I was, being called girl in front of a stranger, in a faded blouse, hands rough, fire-marked arm, invisible. That night, I could not sleep, not because I was crying, because I was thinking. For the first time since I entered that house, I was not thinking about survival. I was thinking about escape. Mama Joy, that was my plan. She was the only person outside that compound who had shown me kindness. I did not know if she could help, but I knew I had to try. Because if I stayed one more rainy season in that house, I would disappear. Not die, disappear, become nobody, become what they had already decided I was. I waited 3 days. I watched the pattern of the household. I noticed that every Thursday afternoon, Auntie Rita went to Bible study at her church and took Tina with her. Blessing and Daniel went to school. Uncle Festus was always at his shop by noon. Thursday was my window. The next Thursday, I slipped out of the compound when it was empty, walked to the pepper soup shed near the motor park, and stood in front of Mama Joy with shaking hands and a plan that had more prayer than logic. "Mama Joy," I said, "please, I need your help." She looked at me for a long moment, then she put down her ladle. She led me to the back of her shed, away from customers and noise. "Talk," she said. And I talked. I told her everything. And when I was done, Mama Joy sat quietly for a moment. Then she said something that changed the course of my life. "I know who your father is, my daughter. I have seen his face on television." She had been waiting for me to speak. And now that I had, everything was about to shift in ways that neither of us could fully predict or control. Mama Joy was not just a pepper soup seller. She was a woman who had buried a husband, raised 4 children alone, and survived things that would bend iron. She was exactly the kind of woman who knew how to act quietly and move quickly when it mattered. She did not panic when I told her. She listened with her full body, the way old African women listen, leaning forward, hands folded, eyes steady. When I finished, she nodded slowly, the way someone nods when something they suspected has finally been confirmed. I knew something was wrong with you from the first morning I saw you, she said. Somebody who carries herself the way you do does not come from nothing. There is training in your bones, my daughter. She told me she had a customer, a man named Mr. Philip, who was a journalist and who knew people in government. She said she would talk to him that evening. She told me to go back to the compound before anyone returned, to behave as if nothing had happened, and to trust her. Can you do that? She asked. I nodded. Good, she said. Now, eat something before you go. She gave me a full bowl of goat meat pepper soup, the kind with thick stock and soft meat that falls off the bone, and I ate it at her small table, in the back of her shed, with tears running quietly down my face. Not sad tears, the kind of tears that come when someone treats you like a human being after a very long time of being treated like something less. I went back to the compound. I swept, I cooked, I served, I endured Blessing's mockery at dinner. I absorbed Uncle Festus's sighing. I said good night to Auntie Rita's back. And I prayed. 4 days passed, then 5. I began to worry that Mama Joy had tried and failed, that Mr. Philip had not believed her, that the walls of that compound were truly unbreakable. On the 6th day, a black Hilux truck with government plates drove slowly down our street. I was sweeping the front of the compound. I saw it. My heart did something it had not done in months. It jumped. The truck stopped. 2 men in plain clothes stepped out. One of them walked to the gate and asked calmly and without any drama, "Is this the compound of Mrs. Rita Festus?" Auntie Rita came out herself to answer. She must have seen the plates. She was already rearranging her face into its best expression. "Yes, I am Rita. How can I help you, gentlemen?" "We are looking for Miss Esther Ose. We have been asked to confirm her well-being." The silence that followed was different from any silence I had ever heard in that compound. It was thick. Auntie Rita's composure, that armor she wore so perfectly, cracked just slightly at the edges. "Esther is my niece," she said carefully. "She is fine. We would like to speak to her directly," the man said, politely, firmly, the way government people speak when they are not asking. Auntie Rita turned around, and for the first time in all those months, she looked at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Fear. Raw, undecorated, animal fear. I walked forward. I stood in front of those 2 men. My wrapper was old. My blouse was faded. My hands were rough. But I lifted my chin the way my father had taught me. Always enter a room as if you belong in it, Esther, because you always will. I said, "I am Esther Ose." The man looked at me. He looked at my hands. He looked at the state of me. Something moved across his face. Then he turned to his colleague and said something quietly. "Come with us, please," he said. I walked out of that gate without packing a bag, without saying goodbye, without looking back. Behind me, I heard Auntie Rita's voice, not loud, not commanding, small, uncertain, calling after me like a woman who suddenly understands the size of the mistake she has made. I did not turn around, but what was waiting for me on the other side of that gate was bigger than rescue. It was a reckoning. And Auntie Rita, Uncle Festus, and every person in that house was about to learn that cruelty has a price, and the bill had finally arrived. My father was not in Enugu. He was in Abuja, in the middle of a state function, when his aide reached him by phone. I was told later that he left the function immediately, that he did not explain to anyone where he was going, that he simply stood up from the table and walked out. They brought me to the government house guest quarters in Aba first, a clean, cool room with real curtains and a bed with 4 pillows. A woman came in and asked if I needed a doctor. I said yes, because the burn on my arm had not healed properly and I had been treating it with water and prayer. A doctor came, then a nurse, Then a female welfare officer from the state who sat with me for 2 hours and asked me questions with a pen and a thick notepad and eyes that kept going tight at the corners the more I spoke. She wrote everything down, everything. That night, I had the first real bath I had taken in months. Not the bucket and cold water affair in Auntie Rita's back bathroom, but a proper shower with hot water that stayed hot. I stood under it for a long time and let it run over my rough hands and my aching shoulders and the back that had been hit with a wooden ladle. And I talked to God in that shower, not with words, just with gratitude. My father arrived the next morning. I heard his voice before I saw him, that deep, calm voice I had grown up with, the voice that used to read me Sunday evenings, the voice that said, "my daughter," like it was a complete sentence. When he walked through the door, he looked at me and stopped. He looked at my hands. He looked at my arm. He looked at my face, the sharpness of my cheekbones, the dryness of my skin, the thing in my eyes that was not quite the same as the thing he had left behind. He crossed the room in 3 steps and held me. And I, who had not cried in front of anyone for months, who had guarded my tears like they were the last of my wealth, I cried. I cried the way a child cries, completely without pride. He said nothing for a long time. He just held me and let me empty myself. Then, quietly, he said, "Tell me everything." I told him. I told him everything I had told the welfare officer, but I told him with the details I had saved. The plate on the floor, the ladle on my back, the word girl, the stolen clothes, the forged letters, the months of silence, all of it. His face did not change expression much as I spoke. My father was not a man who wore his emotions openly. But his hand, the hand resting on the arm of his chair, tightened slowly until his knuckles showed. When he finished, he picked up his phone and made 3 calls. I do not know exactly what was said in those calls, but I know that by the following Monday, 3 things happened. 1. Auntie Rita and Uncle Festus's 2 commercial properties in Aba were flagged for a tax audit that apparently had been pending for 6 years and was now being urgently pursued. 2. Auntie Rita was summoned by the State Welfare Agency to answer questions regarding the care and treatment of a minor placed under her guardianship. The welfare officer who sat with me for 2 hours was the one who handled the file. She did not write softly. 3. A lawyer arrived at their compound with a formal letter. I did not read that letter, but I heard from Mama Joy later that Auntie Rita came out of the compound after reading it and sat down on the steps of her own front door like her legs had stopped working. But my father was not finished, because what happened next was not just legal. It was personal, and it was public, and it was the kind of thing that people in Aba talked about years after. Auntie Rita had spent 2 years building a version of me, helpless, voiceless, invisible. She was about to meet the real one, in front of everyone. My father requested a family meeting, formal, with elders, the kind of meeting that, in our tradition, carries the weight of a court. He sent word to every elder in the family. He sent word to the church where Auntie Rita paraded herself as a woman of God every Sunday. He requested the presence of the church pastor. He invited Mama Joy. He invited Mr. Philip, the journalist who had helped carry the message. The meeting was held in the family compound in Umuze, the same compound where Auntie Rita had grown up, where she had learned the family name, where she had once been a little girl herself before she forgot what it meant to be human. When I walked into that compound, I was wearing a dress my mother had brought for me, deep burgundy, simple, well-fitted, the kind of thing my auntie would have taken off my back and given to Blessing without a second thought.
My mother walked beside me. My father walked on my other side. My brothers flanked us behind. Auntie Rita was already seated. Uncle Festus sat beside her. Blessing sat with her eyes on the ground. They had dressed carefully, all three of them, the kind of careful dressing that says, we are trying to look like we are not afraid. They were afraid. The eldest elder opened the meeting and gave my father the floor. My father stood. He did not shout. He did not perform. He spoke in the quiet voice of a man who has already decided what will happen and is now simply announcing it to the room. He recounted everything I had told him, slowly, with detail, with the calm that is more devastating than anger. With every sentence, I watched Auntie Rita's face. I watched her try to maintain composure. I watched the composure fail. I watched her eyes go to the elders, searching for sympathy, for alliance, for someone who would speak on her behalf. The elders' faces were stone. When my father finished, the eldest elder turned to Auntie Rita and gave her the chance to speak. She opened her mouth. She spoke about how difficult I was, how ungrateful, how she had done her best. Her voice wavered. She said things that made no sense when held against what I had described. She was building a story on sand, and everyone in that compound could see the sand. One of the older women, a grand aunt who had known my father since childhood, stood up before Auntie Rita could finish. "Father Lord," she said, just those two words, nothing else, and she sat back down. The pastor spoke. He said what he needed to say about the responsibility of care and the sin of cruelty hidden behind closed doors. He was not gentle. Then the eldest elder delivered what could only be called a verdict, because that is what it was. Auntie Rita and Uncle Festus were to apologize to me, standing, before the entire gathering, before the elders, before God. They were to do it in full voice, with no conditions and no qualifications. Auntie Rita stood up. For a moment, I thought she would refuse. I could see the war in her body, pride fighting survival, arrogance wrestling with reality. Survival won. She stood before me, and Auntie Rita, the woman who made me eat on the floor beside her dogs, the woman who hit me, mocked me, stolen my voice, forged my letters, called me girl in front of strangers. That woman looked me in my eyes and said she was sorry. It was not a powerful apology. It did not have the weight of genuine remorse. I could see she was sorry about the consequences, not the act. But she said the words, standing in front of everyone. I looked at her and I felt nothing like what I expected. Not triumph, not fire, something quieter. The kind of feeling that comes when something that has been wrong for a long time is finally made right. Stillness, like water after a storm has passed. The two commercial properties remained under audit. They were eventually found to owe back taxes that nearly wiped out what they had built. Uncle Festus's business connections in the state dried up with a speed that he could not explain, but that those who understood power understood perfectly well. Blessing lost a federal scholarship she had been expecting, a one that required a government recommendation that never came. Mama Joy got a small contract to supply food to a state government function. She cried when she told me. She said she had not asked for it. My father had sent someone to her himself. Mr. Philip wrote the story. He was careful about it. He did not use my full name or my father's position directly, but the story of a young woman mistreated in a relative's home and rescued when the truth came out was published and spread across Aba faster than any government press release. Auntie Rita could not go to her church for 6 months. As for me, I went back to school. My father enrolled me in a university. I studied, I worked, and the roughness slowly left my hands, though I did not mind it when it lingered, because it reminded me of what I had survived and how. I am telling you this story not because I want you to celebrate revenge. I want you to understand something that the women in my family say. The thing my mother said to me the morning after that family meeting when I asked her how I was supposed to move forward after everything. She said, "Esther, you did not survive that house because you are lucky. You survived because you refused to become what they tried to make you. That is the only victory that truly belongs to you." And she was right. No matter where life places you, no matter whose house you eat in, whose floor you sleep on, whose words try to carve you into something smaller than you are not what they say you are. You are what you carry in your chest, quietly, past every humiliation, every sleepless night, every meal on the floor. The governor's daughter did not forget who she was. Even in a faded blouse, with rough hands, without a phone, without anyone to call, she did not forget. And neither should you. If this story moved you, subscribe right now if you have not already. Turn on your notification bell and share this story with someone who needs to hear it today.